And thank you so much for coming. Nothing like a full house to calm your nerves. My name is Kevin McMichael, and I'm a senior PR major. And today I'm going to be talking about an experience I had this semester, which illustrated how internal advocacy can illustrate lifelong PR. So before I begin, I'd like to give a few statistics. That way you can understand the motivation for this experience that occurred. As you can tell from the title, I'm going to be talking about the LGBT community. Whenever I say that, it technically stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender. It can also be LGBTQAI, but I will be using LGBTQ or LGBT for simplicity. But generally, the community is just anyone that identifies as a gender or sexual orientation minority. So the Human Rights Campaign a few months ago published a pretty groundbreaking study in which they talked to LGBT youth versus non-LGBT youth. And this right here would be high schoolers and middle schoolers, and these were what were their pressing issues facing them. If you look at LGBT youth, it's not accepting families, school and bullying, fear of being out or open. Whereas non-LGBT, it was classes and exams, college, financial pressures. This to me illustrates that maybe there's something going on with LGBT youth, that there are some pressures being put on them that are causing them to not live life to the best of their ability, causing them to suffer in grades, etc. As we continue, this is where the statistics started to get a little bit more upsetting for me as a Christian. If you look at this, people that are more likely to attend a religious service. LGBT, only a little bit over 25% of those youth said that they were likely to attend a service, and even less than 25 said that they were likely to participate in a youth group. Versus non-LGBT youth, who it was a little bit over 50 for both statistics. Also, if you look at these smiley faces, it can show you that LGBT youth are a lot less likely to be happy in life. Not that happiness is everything, but another study that was published in February by the Stonewall organization of the UK found that 22% of all LGBT adults had experienced a hate crime within the past 12 months. So what that means practically, since a lot of those words are thrown around a lot by people, is if you were to line up 10 people, 10 LGBT adults, 2 of them had experienced either verbal or physical harassment to the point of being coerced into an action that they were not okay with. So that could be being hit with a baseball bat coming out of a club, which is common in the UK and the US. That could be verbally being harassed to the point of leaving a restaurant or a restroom. 22%. If we look specifically at transgender adults, the stats were more so in the 40s to 50s. It's very discouraging. Also, the FBI, I'm not quite sure why they do this study, but every year they release the statistics on hate crimes in the United States, and they use kind of the same definition. They found that LGBT people are the largest recipients of hate crimes in the United States. Over Jewish people, over black people, over any other minority you can think of, LGBT people were the largest recipient of that. So numbers can sometimes just be like, oh, that's sad, move on with my day. But I wanted to put a face to it. As someone who struggles personally with same-sex attraction, I have felt a lot of these examples of conditional love in my own life. Whether that be me saying, well, I fit in with this church, but if they knew that I am even tempted with this, they will not welcome me. They will not allow me to be in church leadership. For example, I was a camp counselor in a Midwest Ohio summer camp. I grew up in Cleveland, so that's why. And near the beginning of the summer, I confided with a few of my fellow counselors, hey, this is something that I've struggled with my whole life. I just want you to be aware in case you have a camper that struggles with it too. I love to talk to them about how to integrate your faith and live a life either of celibacy or of monogamy. The next week, I was called in by the director of the camp, who told me that one of those people had given this information to some churches that sent students to the camp. And those members of churches called into the camp saying they didn't want their son to have the gay counselor. They didn't want the counselor that would indoctrinate their children. They didn't want the counselor that would touch their children. What this meant for me was, personally, they were associating a temptation that I had with basically being someone who was a sexual animal that would look inappropriately at their children or turn them gay. I remember going to my cabin after that night and just crying and feeling so unwelcome by a group of people that I loved. And I am not even someone who practices in gay activity. I was just simply saying, this is something I struggle with. For example, that would be like me telling other counselors, I kind of have a hot head. I kind of lose my temper sometimes. And people calling in and saying, I don't want the domestic abuser to be my children's counselor. There's a sense of a jump that is made. And because of that, it has led me and a lot of other LGBT people to view love as conditional. This is still something that I'm working through, as thinking they're buying this facade that I have up. What will happen if they knew? So this leads to the Nashville Statement. For those of you that don't know, at the end of August, a statement was published through the Center of Biblical Manhood and Womanhood called the Nashville Statement, which was 16 statements or clauses about their held beliefs regarding LGBT issues within the modern church. I'm not here to discuss whether or not I agree with what was said, but I still did have a lot of issues with the statement. I remember reading it the first time. I actually woke up, went on Twitter, saw that something was trending, and looked into it and was like, oh my goodness, this is something that applies to me. So I took some time to read it, and a few things stood out to me. One was a hurtful rhetoric that was propagated, a rhetoric of, basically, I viewed this statement personally as a list of 16 things that LGBT people within the church can't do, or ways in which they are flawed. And nowhere in there did I feel like I was welcome. Nowhere in there did I feel like the community as a whole was protected or apologized to. Instead, it was just statements. Although I was not surprised by the statements, I think the timing was inappropriate. As a PR professional, the fact that Hurricane Harvey had just occurred and the church decided to focus on this issue was very upsetting to me, as well as the fact that over 100 prominent Christian leaders signed this statement. To me, that felt like you were ganging up. If I were to go back and redo this statement for them, besides possibly rewording some of it, I would have published it in Christianity Today or in an internal site of, hey guys, this is just kind of what we believe, just want to make sure everyone's on the same track. Instead, it was so publicized and so loud that I think that the LGBT issue is where we lose most people. I know if you guys have ever gone out and evangelized, usually you get the question, well, what about the gay thing? I don't really like how you treat my gay friend. The fact that we were publicizing something like that so heavily, to me, didn't really make sense. So for example, they write in Article 10, which is usually the most cited article, we affirm that it is sinful to approve of homosexual immorality or transgenderism, and that such approval constitutes an essential departure from Christian faithfulness and witness. Although growing up in a small Baptist church in the Midwest, this type of statement did not surprise me, that they would say that we do not support gay activity. The wording of it seemed to make it more black and white than I think it should be. And because of their large publicity, it was not missed by a lot of people, including the mayor of Nashville publicly condoning the city's name tied to this statement. We had some Biola students write for the Huffington Post about how they were upset that Biola professors had signed it. We even had a rally on Washington regarding this statement. And I think that Matthew Vines, who was a prominent Side A Christian writer, sums it up best when he says, "You have to be pretty disconnected from our culture to think that being anti-LGBTQ is the main message the church needs to be spreading now." Although I think it is a hot-button issue, I question if that's the flag that we should be planting in the cultural ground at the moment. And whenever I found out that one of my favorite professors, Dr. K. Eric Thomas, had signed it, I wept. I was very hurt that a man that I respected and loved had signed his name to something that I felt such hurt from. And so I emailed him and said, "Hey, Dr. Thomas, I've had you for 2 years now. I saw you sign this. I would just love to meet and hear about why you signed it. What were the motivations? Help me understand. I don't want to sit in a corner, as Nick mentioned. It was actually the perfect segue into this. I don't want to sit into the corner and just be upset and not engage in a conversation and understand." And he emailed me back, and we did meet. Little did I know, Dr. Thomas was one of the original 8 writers of the statement. So unbeknownst to me, I was just expecting some professor who this had come across his desk, and so he signed it. And I was just going to be like, "Why did you sign it?" Instead, I was engaging with the discussion of, why did you, John Piper, and Wayne Grudem write this? Let's talk to them. Let's get your opinions. We have met every 2 weeks throughout the semester talking about this, talking about life. He asked me parenting advice, which is always fun. The other day he just said, "So my daughter's posting a lot of selfies on Instagram. Should I be concerned?" It's things like these that just make those conversations so enjoyable for me. And the first conversation I went into, I had done my research, and we sat there for almost 2.5 hours just dialoguing, truly dialoguing. Him saying, "I got this email from this person that's really upset, and I don't understand why." Me saying, "Well, this is how I was upset." And then him saying, "Well, why are you upset about this? Well, what about this?" And me saying, "Well, what about this?" And it led to such a fruitful discussion that was rooted in truth, openness, grace, and authentic love. What I mean by that is that we were both willing to say, "You're probably right there," or "I don't really know." Him saying, "Yeah, I really wanted it to be worded this way, but I was trumped, and I'm really upset about this as well." Openness in just being open with each other, and then showing grace and authentic love and saying, even though you signed this, even though you oppose this, we're still brothers in Christ. And we took steps towards each other, which I think is the biggest point for this and for PR in general, is that we both took steps towards each other's side. We didn't switch. I don't agree with the statement. I still don't agree with the statement. He still wrote it. And that's not going to change. However, I think that this example highlights a larger issue within the church, which is the use of personal PR. The way that I see this is research. You have to be knowledgeable on current topics, whether that be being involved in digital technology, to reading articles, magazines, just staying up to date, to being strategically outspoken. There were some people at Biola that wrote articles for the Huffington Post that I did not like, because instead they simply said, "How dare you? Biola should fire them. What is going on? We hate this." They were not strategic in being outspoken and saying, "Let's talk to them. Who do we need to talk to? That way we can help this issue." Building mutually beneficial relationships, that's kind of a buzzword in the PR field. But what it means for me is saying, how can me and Dr. Thomas both benefit from this conversation that we're having? How can we build a relationship, as Nick mentioned in the session prior? And lastly, just being honest and open with each other. Being open and hurts. I think sometimes we enter into tough conversations with our walls up, afraid to be vulnerable that they might use that against us. So some developments from these conversations. The Dr. Thomas did ask me to co-write an official amendment to the statement, which should be published hopefully by the beginning of next year. And I also think that we are writing an article just kind of listing these discussions. And that's just so exciting to me that I can help clarify issues. I can help the church evangelize to the gay community. And all of that just through me unknowingly being a PR professional in these personal conversations. It's really incredible. Although I am still on a journey and am still deciding whether I'm side A or side B, I am excited to see what the future will hold and how the church can continue to love and support the LGBTQAI community. Thank you guys so much for listening. Does anyone have any questions?